Hello YouTube, it's time for another video. Today I thought I would just do a quick video on UniFi gateways, specifically setting up a gaming VLAN and enabling some quality of service QoS features. So I've been using UniFi for about a year now. I had UCG Fiber. I've just recently migrated to UCG Industrial, which is basically UCG Fiber with integrated Wi-Fi. Pretty much the same device, but it's fanless design. Anyway, without further ado, here's some of the things I recommend. So typically for network setup, you may have your default network, you may have an IoT network, and you may have a guest network. However, specifically for gaming, then I would recommend you set up a separate VLAN to keep gaming traffic isolated. This can be used for gaming consoles like Xbox, like PlayStation, or your PCs. So to do this, we create new. We can give it a name. In this instance, we'd call it gaming. It will be on the internal zone. We can give it a subnet. You can change this if you need to, and it will get a VLAN ID. You can create some manual settings here. So we would normally typically isolate the network. We'd want to ensure that we have internet access allowed. Now, I would typically disable multicast DNS, because unless you have devices across VLANs that you need to access, then this could potentially add some noise, or multicast packets that were broadcasted on that VLAN that actually don't need to be there. So for this purpose of keeping the gaming VLAN segregated and completely separate, then I would recommend having that disabled. There isn't much we have to do else apart from apply create the network by clicking create. You should provision a network there. Then we can see we have now a new gaming VLAN. Now, something else you want to check is in cybersecure. So depending on how you have your gateway set up, you may be using IDS and IPS. So IDS is intrusion detection system, which basically means it monitors and notifies of any kind of threats against the number of signatures that it captures. IPS is intrusion protection system, and this basically is a blocking mechanism that will, once the threats have been identified, it will block them at the same time. So by default, all of your networks would normally be here, but when you create a new one, it won't be here. And gaming specifically, we most likely want to keep this out of the IDS IPS chain, because we typically don't want to inspect those packets, because that can add micro latency, even a small amount. So in instances for competitive gaming, if you're playing any kind of FPS like Battlefield, Call of Duty, Warzone, things like this, Fortnite, then you're probably going to want to have this disabled. What I would also do and recommend is creating a detection exclusion rule. So this is just kind of a double safeguard to make sure that none of that traffic gets inspected. If for some reason there was an update and it got added to the rule, then this helps kind of prevent this. So in this case, we can select an IP address of a specific device we want to target, or a network or a subnet. In this instance, we're going to want to choose the gaming network or the gaming VLAN. We click apply, and there we can see that we have a new role created. So this pretty much covers what we want to do in the cybersecure section. Now, some other features I would recommend before we proceed is Bufferbloat can be an issue for gaming traffic, specifically if you've got a household where multiple users are doing things on the internet, someone downloads a large file. This can cause latency spikes and issues, especially when playing online. So one of the things I do recommend in UniFi specifically is to go into the internet settings, select your internet connection, and just make sure that you have smart queues enabled. What smart queues does is it uses fair queuing policy discipline, which actually prioritizes smaller packets associated with gaming traffic and voice services, such as VoIP calls, FaceTime calls and things like this. Anything that requires low latency normally has priority. So this will ensure that large downloads will not hog up all the bandwidth and affect the performance of the applications that you need to run most, especially those latency sensitive ones. So I have a 500 up and 500 down symmetrical fiber line. What I recommend is you do this slightly under what your cap is. Now, even if you have a line rated up to a maximum speed, it isn't necessarily representative of the actual speed that you'll obtain. So I recommend doing some speed tests, seeing what your maximum sustained speed is, and then, I don't know, going 5 or 10% below. So for example, mine normally caps out around 476 megabits up and down. So I kind of go anywhere between 455, 465 is kind of what I found seems to work for me. So just a point to note. Now, I also recommend, in addition to running smart queues, that you set up some quality of service policies. Now, to do this, we go to the policy engine. So here we have policy table, we have zones, and then objects. And I recommend doing this directly from the policy table. I've found it's most effective. So what we want to do is we want to create a new policy. Here we have the create policy rules. So we have firewall, root, QoS, NAT, DNS, port forward. We need to select QoS. For example, we're going to set up some, let's say, QoS policy for certain games we might want to play. In this instance, let's say FPS shooters. And we can choose to select a certain type of QoS behavior, so we can limit. This will basically guarantee a maximum download limit and upload limit for this application, service, or device, whatever we choose to select, or you can prioritize, which means that the service will get high prioritization in the queue, or you can do prioritize and limit, which will basically give a guaranteed limit of bandwidth and also give the priority status. Now, in most cases, you probably just want to prioritize. So it's important to select your internet connection as the interface. So we only have internet 1 on this device. Here you can, for source, you can select it applies to anything on the network that may be using the service or device or network. In this instance, as we're specifically focused on creating a gaming VLAN, then I would recommend that we isolate all QoS policies specifically to that gaming VLAN. This helps kind of focus what the QoS policy should be doing, and it also means that there's not unnecessary filtering and policy management across all VLANs, which could add more compute resource that's not necessary. So the interesting part is destination. So we need to understand where that QoS policy is going, what it's actually focusing on in terms of service. So for example, for FPS games, we would want to select the apps category. And here we have a couple of options. Specific enables us to target certain applications. Category enables us to go through and select a category. So for example, if I type in games, we have a section for online games. Now, from what I've read, this should cover literally all of the games UniFi has in its specific apps category library. I'm not sure if this is true or not. This is what I've kind of read up on, but there isn't any official documentation to say if this is a true statement or not. So in most cases, if you're only playing a certain subset of games, I would recommend choosing the specific category and then selecting games. So if we look for things like Call of Duty, we can find Call of Duty. If we look for Battlefield, we can find Battlefield. If you're playing CSGO, we have CS game. What else we have? We have Team Fortress. And there's a number of other games. Fortnite, popular one. And then we can go, what another one? Rocket League. And just an example, so we can select these and we create a QoS policy for this specific VLAN. And what we do is we apply. And now when we actually go to QoS rules, we can see that we have this policy in place. And you can also do other rules. You could specifically target a device for priority access. So for example, you may want to create a new QoS policy and say, for example, we want to actually have a PC. So let's say we have a gaming PC or a gaming console. Hope if I can type that right. Then we can say we just want to prioritize. We can then choose a device. I have a PC listed here, for example. We can then, again, we can target specific applications or services. In this instance, we want to give priority to the device, whatever it's doing. So we can just say any and always. And there we go. We also have priority QoS policy directly targeted at a device. So that's pretty much it. That's what I would recommend. And you can see here in the main dashboard now that we have critical traffic prioritization. We can see that there are a number of applications here listed, including Call of Duty, Battlefield, CS Game, Team Fortress, Fortnite, and Rocket League. And also we have smart queues enabled. So people using other services like calls and things like this will also not be disrupted from users that are downloading big files, so there won't be any download hog impacts. So this is just a very kind of crude, quick setup guide for creating a VLAN, creating some quality of service policies, and hopefully improving your overall gaming experience. Now, I plan to make some more videos in this series as I'm doing more testing with my own devices, and we'll follow up. But if you want to kind of discuss or have any questions, then please feel free to leave them in the comments. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Ciao. Peace out.